Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and today's guest is Dr. Melissa Kalt. She's a physician, integrative wellness specialist, transformative coach, and mother of 5. She graduated from the Medical College of Wisconsin in 1997, is board certified in internal medicine, pediatrics, and lipidology. Her peers voted her one of the nation's best doctors in 2009, and she's maintained that ranking since. And her love of learning didn't stop there because her own personal struggles and experience with trauma started her on a path of holistic and integrative healing modalities. She became an esogenetic colorpuncture certified practitioner, a Reiki master teacher, and transformative coach. She has so much to share with us, and I'm really excited to introduce you to her because, first of all, not only is she just doing so much for so many, but she got caught in that supermom Wonder Woman trap, doing everything for everyone, being everything for everyone all the time. It's not without a price. I can't wait for you to meet her as she shares some amazing lessons in staying in integrity and honoring your truth. Here she is. I am so excited to share with you Dr. Melissa Kalt today. And she just has the most incredible background and expertise and experience, and just honored to just have her here with us today. So hi.
Hi, thanks, Debbie.
Welcome. So I want to jump right in with the topic of the calm before the storm. How do you resonate with that? How does that relate to you?
Yeah, I think, for me, when I look back on my own experience of betrayal in my life, I remember at the time being in the complete chaos and the feeling like a victim in that moment. But when I look back on it now, there was a period, this so-called what I refer to as the calm before the storm, where things were really brewing, where things were not right, where I was walking on eggshells or not saying things to avoid rocking the boat, or, not speaking my truth, not being in full integrity with myself and what I needed. And I think that it's really important to bring awareness when we're doing that, because I think that that's the first key point where we have an opportunity to change the course of sort of how things play out. In my case, with regard to betrayal.
Mm-hmm. So when you say, when you're talking about just sort of it sounds like tuning things out, not paying attention to your, that wise inner guide. Do you remember feeling like something isn't right and shutting it down?
Oh, yeah. So for me, I had the sense that something was not right for a long time. My particular betrayal I'm referring to is with regard to my former marriage and my children's father's relationship with our children. But there were definite issues before that where the kids would tell me something and he would say something else, and I didn't know who to believe or what was right. And I didn't listen always to my inner wisdom or my inner guidance because my mind was totally in the way. Like, oh my gosh, you have 5 children. You have to keep this family together. You have to, whatever. And I think there were definite experiences where either the kids told me things or, we would argue frequently about money because I earned all of it and he spent it as a stay-at-home parent. And, so the day the credit card bill would come in the mail was a good day just to kind of avoid each other instead of dealing with the issue.
Mm-hmm. And, it's so many women and men I speak with, it's the same. It's such a similar story where they felt something wasn't right, but they didn't listen to their gut. Like their gut was telling them something feels off, something doesn't feel right. But it wasn't in their realm of consciousness to even consider maybe asking, hey, what's going on here? Or just to find out the truth, maybe because underneath they knew something, that was going to cause everything to unravel.
Absolutely. And in fact, I've seen a study recently that they've asked divorced people, how soon did you know something was off in the relationship? And most of them say within 2 weeks. They still chose to get married anyway.
Wow.
But that inner wisdom, that knowing was there early on.
And it's amazing. In my study, the first stage, and this is no judgment, no blame, but this was with every single participant in my study. I talk about how there are, let's say, 4 legs of a table, and if you were to only have 2 legs on, of that table strengthened, the table will be wobbly and unstable, and that's how we walk around. And those 2 legs that we focus on are mental and physical, and we really neglect the emotional and the spiritual. And we shut it down almost to make it easier, so we can get through our day, so we can get things done. But that's where all that intuition is. So then what?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then what happened? So finally, there was the breakdown. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So there had been things building for a long time with regard to honesty, with regard to spending and that sort of thing. But it was a February morning, a cold morning, almost 6 years ago, my then 7-year-old daughter burst into my bedroom. I was sleeping. She was hysterical. She jumped and was clutching me as he chased her up the stairs, kind of bellowing and whatnot. And she was adamant that he had hurt her and that this was not going to happen again. And I was so amazed by this 7-year-old girl standing in my bedroom who was willing to stand in her truth. She was amazing. She was like my hero, my role model, because she was better at it at 7 than I was at 40. Saying he always lies when he doesn't want to get in trouble. This will not happen again.
Wow.
And I removed him from the house that day.
So you believed your daughter?
I did. But I think that I had never seen anything prior to that. He'd never done anything to them in front of me, but I had heard rumblings, but I had never seen anything. I'd ask him, and I would get the, who are you going to believe, this little kid over the man you've been married to for 20 years or whatever? And so my mind doubted myself. But on that day, it was the fact that she was so solid, standing in her power, that really inspired me to do the same thing.
What a warrior.
It was amazing.
Yeah. So what happened after that?
So he moved out and did a lot of counseling. And I ended up filing for divorce a little over a year later. There hadn't been a lot of progress in the early stages. That's now almost 6 years ago. And so he's made progress since then. And just in the last few months, he's starting to take the kids overnight and that sort of thing. So they're rebuilding their relationship with him. But the really beautiful gift in it for our whole family, because there are 5 children, was this really instilled in me a desire to study trauma. And so having the medical background, that was like the traditional medical thing, but I really dove into trauma because I wanted my children to be healthy and well. I wanted them to be whole. I wanted to be whole. I wanted my ex-husband to be whole. And so that study of trauma and the limbic system and how things land in the body led me on this amazing path of exploring alternative medicine, Eastern philosophy, transformative coaching, all of these things that brought me to this really beautiful place where I am today. And
I would love to know about that. I would love to know. So you go from this experience, and did you, in the beginning, did you feel like a victim? Did you have any physical, mental, emotional symptoms? And the doctor in you, how did you handle that? And where did the alternative information come in? And where'd you make that switch?
Yeah, in the beginning, it was really hard because here I was, this woman who, was working as a doctor. I have 3 board certifications. I was supporting a family of 7. He had not been working for a long time. And I was used to being Superwoman and painting this picture of this very perfect life. to the outside world. And so when this happened on a Tuesday morning, I actually had an appointment with a therapist shortly after that. And she was like, you need to take the rest of the week off. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't take days off work. I literally had worked in the past with 104 fever and wore a mask so I wouldn't get patients sick. Like, I did not take care of myself at all. Like, what do you mean I have to take off work? Well, so I mean, obviously it was my choice, but I did take off work to get my house in order, to be there for my kids after school, to be the one that tell them all of that kind of things. And I was like, the whole house of cards just crumbled because the outside world knew my perfect little life had blown up, and everyone at work knew I wasn't there. My family, knew what was going on, the friends and whatnot. And so, it was really hard not to feel like a victim. All of a sudden, I was single parenting 5 kids by myself. Wow. No help, trying to work full time, not having any financial support. Like, I had to work because I had to feed them. But I didn't have support systems and help. And because I had insisted on being Superwoman for all those years, no one knew that I needed any help.
See, that's the big trap with the whole Superwoman thing. It's like, well, we can do it. We've got it all. We don't ask for help. We need it desperately. But, there's something so interesting that you said where it's like the whole house of cards came tumbling down. And what I see in my work, and you can speak to this too, when it comes to transformation, there's got to be this complete breakdown of everything you've known, life as you've known it, sort of the death of the life you've known and who you've been in order for this new version of you to emerge. Yes. Yeah. So tell me about that. What happened?
Yeah. So I really surrendered, not as in a white flag giving up kind of way, but as I can't hold together this image. This has fallen apart. I need to start from scratch. I need to start over and rebuild what it is I want. And so I got my kids going, working with therapists that specialized in trauma therapy. They did EMDR. I started reading books about brain spotting. I started studying Bessel van der Kolk's work and learning about the belly brain. And what I started to figure out as I was exploring all this, I started exploring, I'm certified in colorpuncture, which is kind of based on Eastern philosophy, even though it was developed in Germany. But what I started to figure out was there were all of these things that I was seeing in the traditional doctor space that were also not being addressed because
Like what?
For example, fatigue. And this is one of the things I've written a book on. I mean, I can't tell you how many 40-something-year-old women came into my office absolutely exhausted. And we're not talking about being like a little bit sleepy. We're talking about being so freaking exhausted that they couldn't enjoy the fun things in their life. They couldn't enjoy spending time with their family. They couldn't enjoy the exercise classes they liked or hanging out with friends because they were exhausted and all they could think about is when they can, lay down and go to bed. And from a doctor's standpoint, you check their thyroid, you make sure they're not anemic, you check their vitamin D level, they don't have any symptoms of sleep apnea, and then you're like, I don't know, sleep more. Like there's nothing that the doctor, Western medical science has to offer in that regard.
And how do doctors look at, let's say, adrenal fatigue, adrenal dysfunction, all of that?
Yeah, there's not, in the Western medicine world, there's not really any credence placed in any of that.
So then here, you're just exhausted and doing this whole super mom Wonder Woman thing, and you just need support. You need a little bit of help. You're realizing that Western medicine isn't quite doing it for you. Did you find a lot of the things that you were trying as far as Eastern philosophies really working and
yes,
helping to heal? Like what? How did it help heal?
So the color puncture, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm really not. I'd love you to share that with everybody. What is that?
It's awesome. It's I refer to it as like acupuncture on steroids, but without needles. So it's different colored lights that you put on the acupoints in particular orders or pattern sequences for different things. So I actually ended up doing a whole practitioner level training predominantly to help my own family, because it was wonderful. If I don't know, if I had to meet with an attorney and anxiety kicked up or something, I could immediately settle it. Like 15 seconds, it's gone.
Wow.
Or, if I was exhausted, that would help. If I was starting to get sick, get a cold or something, there were treatments for that. There were treatments for migraines and insomnia and pretty much you name it. There were treatments for everything. So I started doing that on myself and on my children. But the thing that was so great about it was it forced me to become aware and attuned to my own body. Because as a doctor, where you had talked about the four-legged table, I was really only using one leg. I was really only using the mental, because doctors don't really pay attention to their bodies at all. There's no time to eat. There's no time to go to the bathroom during the day. I consciously drank very little water so I would not have to go to the bathroom, because there's no time in the way a doctor's schedule works. And so I had really established this pattern of ignoring myself, ignoring my body. But when I started doing these treatments, it was really a great way for me to attune to my body. What am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm feeling butterflies in my stomach. I wonder what those are about.
And how did you notice? Yeah. Tell me some of the treatments where you noticed, well, I did this and I really feel better, or I feel different, or I don't feel as tired or as whatever.
Yeah, there were treatments on treating the lymphatic system to drain, and our lymph buffer tends to get overloaded under periods of extreme stress or that sort of thing. And so my energy level would improve significantly after that. Or I could have really sort of upset stomach, not necessarily nausea, but just that like stomach, abdominal unrest, and treat that and it would be gone. There were numerous times where I had like influenza or a cold or something come out. There was once my son had a huge gymnastics meet and he had a lead in a play, and he and I both started getting influenza the morning of opening night, and I treated us and it went away. And I had to treat us again 36 hours later when it started coming back, but then it stayed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so
and this was the treatment with that color? Wow.
Yeah. So that really kind of started things off for me. And it's not, I think the thing is it's not a mindless, like, oh, I don't want to be sick, so I'm just going to get rid of the symptoms kind of thing. It's more having to attune what's going on, what overloaded my system in the first place that allowed me to get sick, or what overloaded my system that made me feel run down. And when I consciously attune to that and I add the light, it almost always goes away for me.
Wow. So now here you are, you're learning these new therapies, you're trying them out on you and the kids, everything's working. How did you then look at your experience? Did you start to look at it a little bit differently?
I absolutely started to look at it differently. And one of the things that I realized, and it was the part that was so hard, was as I started to realize that I could be a victor in a situation, not a victim. There were ways that I realized the way that I needed to do that was by acknowledging my own self-betrayal and really being self-responsible, and seeing where I had not been true to myself before. And that made me start changing things in my then current life as well. One crazy example, this one always sounds really bizarre, but I learned over time that specific physical symptoms meant specific things. For example, tightness and pain in my left neck meant my fear of not being good enough was active. And as soon as I looked into it and I saw where that was active in my external world and I addressed it, it would go away. But I would get similar symptoms or messages. I always think now symptoms are messages from the body. I had never had trouble with acne my whole life. When I was going through my divorce, I had horrible acne on my back, like very, very painful, big lesions that would take like 4 to 6 months to go away. I tried for a year and a half to get rid of it. No luck at all. Then I talked to an Eastern medicine person, and she said, matters of the skin usually are that your boundaries are being violated. And as soon as I
that's so interesting. Think about that. Your skin is the boundary to you.
Yes.
Wow.
So as soon as I looked at that and I thought, where are my boundaries being violated and how am I allowing that to happen? Or how am I inviting that to happen, really, right? Because I am responsible for my own boundaries. As soon as I figured it out, everything was gone in 4 days. These were big, huge things that were taking like 4 months to go away, gone in 4 days. And it came back twice, but for like a day or two. And I would think, gosh, where are my boundaries being violated and how am I allowing that to happen? And as soon as I locked onto it, it was gone.
That's amazing. And it really shows how intricately connected the mind and body are. And it's almost as if here is this message, like you said, you're receiving these messages, and when you hear it and validate it and understand it, it goes away.
Yes. As soon as you've got the message, it's gone.
Right. It doesn't need to keep tapping you on the shoulder. So what did all of this teach you, and what did it lead to?
Yeah. So, following that, I did some energetic work and transformative coaching as well. And I found that I was really struggling in my medical practice, even though I loved caring for my patients. I loved being the medical director and supervising doctors and whatnot. I was really struggling with the duality of being in both worlds, sitting in an academic medical center where I needed to treat things from the standard medical standpoint, but knowing this poor exhausted woman who I'm sending out the door without having help, I could do things for, but I can't because of the agreement that I had with them. They knew I was doing this on the side, but I couldn't mention it to patients was the agreement we had made. So,
and you know what? I imagine right there, you feel almost as if you're betraying your patient because you know how to help them heal.
Absolutely. And that duality, that was really out of integrity for me to know, that this is a limiting belief issue or a fear of whatever issue. I have a lot of intuitive guidance as well, but to know what's going on with someone and not be able to help them was really, really challenging for me. So I decided earlier this year to strike out on my own. I've published books on freeing yourself from symptoms, fatigue, insomnia, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, that sort of thing. I've created a training program for coaches. I'm doing a lot of aligning with your why work because I think that the breakdown, whether that's from betrayal or otherwise, is necessary for a breakthrough. And I think oftentimes it brings us closer to our why, our calling, our destiny, and what we're supposed to be here doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like your breakthrough happened because of your betrayal. Yeah.
It did, for sure.
Yeah. And do you have clients, patients coming in now to see you and a lot of their challenges are stemming from, let's say, an unhealed betrayal?
Oh, absolutely. I think that pretty much all symptoms are a result of trauma of some sort. And trauma in general is going to be a betrayal, whether it's of a parent, a significant other, a best friend, a teacher, even just a betrayal of their environment. If something's happened, an assault, say, by someone they don't know, it's all based on trauma. I think that's absolutely correct.
You mentioned EMDR, and I just want to make sure for everybody listening, they understand what that is. Can you just give us an example of what EMDR is? Just explain it a little bit.
Yeah, so EMDR is a wonderful process that stimulates both sides of the brain, the left and the right, either through sound, through eye movement, or through physical contact, like tapping on both sides. And what we find is that, most of the skills that people learn to cope with or control anxiety are things that their cognitive brain, their thinking, rational, logical part of the brain has learned. But the trouble is when we're triggered, and I always define a trigger as when we're thrown into a place of reaction instead of choosing how to consciously respond. We're reacting, an old neural pathway is triggered. the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain is completely offline and the limbic system is triggered. So we have no access to those tools that we have in our toolbox. So the nice thing with EMDR or brain spotting, which is similar, is by activating both sides of the brain, we can reprocess the memory through both sides. So it's affecting the limbic system response as well, and get really great resolution fast.
Yeah. And what would you recommend to someone who's struggling?
With regard to what in particular?
They're in some kind of trauma, whether it's from betrayal or just some kind of crisis. What would you suggest as a first step for them?
I think taking some time to really be clear and settle into their own body, and really asking what it is that they need gives them a great base to then reach out for support, whether that is to a trained therapist, which if they are dealing with trauma or betrayal is typically the best first step. But even reaching out to friends and family for extra support and getting through, whether that's making meals or picking up kids or taking them one night a week so you can just have a night to yourself. I think really checking in, and the reason I say getting into your body is not so much because of body symptoms, but because it allows us to sort of quiet the mind and see what the rest of those legs of the table need. Because the mind is the one that's going to overpower things and say, oh, you can do this, pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing. But being able to receive support in that moment is really important.
And it's so interesting because that's when we need it the most. And that's where we're the least likely when it comes to betrayal, because we feel ashamed or we'll be judged or pitied or whatever. So absolutely great advice. Anything you want to make sure we cover before we wrap up?
I think that the thing that I would say, especially based on my own experience, it's really easy when we're in the throes of the betrayal to really feel like we've been victimized. And by no means am I blaming the victim ever. But I think that it's a really important choice to make at that point, to either stay in a victim mindset where things are just happening to you and they're out of your control, versus choosing empowerment. Because when we choose empowerment and we choose to be responsible to ourselves and to not betray ourselves, not only do we not set ourselves up for similar situations in the future, we're not walking on eggshells and not saying the things that need to be said, but we really have the opportunity to blossom into our truest selves. And so I think that was something that was really hard for me to hear back then. But it's probably the most important message that I got at the time.
Yeah. The most transformative, and that's where our freedom lies, and that's where our power lies for sure. How do we learn more about you? Where do we go?
MelissaKaltMD.com. And I think I gave you the link to a clarity guide that I have out as well, which I always think is great at this time of year as we're looking, to the new year and what we want to create in our own lives, to get clear about where we're headed and next steps.
Absolutely. And everything will be in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for joining us. And you gave us some great insight and inspiration for those who are struggling and where to go next. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Debbie.
I just want to thank Dr. Melissa for being on the podcast today. She's been so kind in giving you her clarity guide, which you can find at freeyourself.melissakaltmd.com/clarity-guide. Don't worry. Head over to the show notes at pbtinstitute.com/podcast, and I'll have the link for you there. Here's my biggest takeaway. Although it's hard, sometimes you need to walk away to stay in integrity. When you do, there's a sense of empowerment, pride, and self-love that you'll feel knowing that you're being true to who you are. So did you enjoy this podcast? Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. And who knows, maybe I'll give you a shout out and let us support you. Go to Facebook and join our group, Women Hacking Betrayal, where we give information, tools, and support to help you move forward and heal once and for all. Can't wait to be with you next time. And here's to your breakthrough.